everyone. Welcome to our journey through the atheist mind. We're really excited that you're watching or listening, and we're excited to have you, Dr. Nagy. How are you?
Thanks, David. I'm fine. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what we've been talking about already. It's making it harder on us to, understand, but it's really helpful that we're asking questions and we're trying to find those answers. We've talked a little bit about what atheism is in general, and we encouraged you that if you feel like we didn't cover everything or that you disagree, you can email us and tell us what you think. We're not going so deep into every detail of everything. We're just generally speaking, what is atheism? And then now we want to talk more about the science, the scientific aspect of it. In general, atheism sounds scientific because the basis of it is believed to be on science. And we want to know, what does science mean?
Yes, that's a very important question, David. Science meaning knowledge. And you can acquire this knowledge by experiment in the laboratory. That is what science gives us. And that is a wonderful thing to have scientific evidence. But let me just explain something about the evidence. We have 5 senses by which we recognize things. We have the vision, the hearing, the touch, the smell, and the taste. Anything lies outside the 5 senses, we cannot really measure it as such in the lab. Let me just clarify this point, because we can measure a few things just outside these 5 senses. You just have a sip of water.
Yeah, and again, I wanted us to start by that because science is something that we learn our whole lives since we're young. And if we are going to talk about it, I wanted to define it. And you talked about it being as knowledge, which is a huge statement, that you believe that science is a source of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Because it seems that if you're a Christian, then you don't believe that science is a form or a source of knowledge for you.
Yeah. No, not at all. The science is very important, but we have 2 types of science, 2 types of knowledge. Something called operational science or observational science. That's the science that we can do in the laboratory. Under the same conditions, you get the same results. So if you give 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, you mix them in California, in London, in Cairo, you'll get the same results, water. This type of science, there is no problem with that science, and there is no contradiction between the operational science and the Bible. Because in order to practice the operational science, you need a law to follow. If the gravity is changing from one day to another haphazardly, I will be really worried to board an aeroplane.
Or walk, really.
Or walk, because you can jump, So what I'm saying here, there are laws that control science, and we all agree about that, and that goes well with a creator who created these laws to follow. But I'd like to just highlight something. Within our 5 senses, there is limitation. So we hear within a certain wave. If that go very high or very low, we can't hear it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but we don't hear it. In this studio, David, there are lots of waves coming from CNN, from BBC, from other organizations, but I am not receiving them because I don't have the receptor to receive them. So some people say, if I can't prove God in the lab, I'm not going to believe in God. That's a wrong assumption, because God is a spirit, so I can't measure him in the test tube. But I can comprehend him by his creation, by the Bible, by Jesus, by lots of other evidence. So the evidence is not only experimental in the lab. That's what I would like to highlight. So operational science goes very well with the Christian faith. And this operational science, who produces the mic and produces the computer that we are using, the light which is shining on us, that is a wonderful science, and we thank God for it. There is another type of science, and that's called origin science or historical science. These are events that happened in the past that I cannot repeat them at present. How can I know this type of the historical science? I can know that if there is a an eyewitness or circumstantial evidence to tell me what happened in the past, or somebody who really can give me a document to tell me this event happened. Let me use an example to explain this. You remember Tutankhamun?
Yeah.
I visited the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and there is a big section with all this gold and very impressive. So this king really died young. So in order to understand the cause of death, there are many, many theories. They did an X-ray and they found a chip in the skull. So they think somebody hit him on the skull or he entered into a war or something. And then they examined that further. They found this an artifact. They found a fractured bone, and they thought that there was an infection that happened in this fractured bone and caused him to die from septicemia. Till now, with all these modern ways of investigation, we don't know how King Tutankhamun died. So that is the historical event. If there is a document, and this is a trustworthy document to tell us what the cause of death, that would be the best way to know, really. In the creation issue and evolution, nobody was there to witness it. For Christians, they believe God did it and witnessed it and gave it to us in the Bible. But for the evolutionists, they have to put some assumptions. And these assumptions has major, major problems, as we discussed before, because chemical reaction cannot produce life. So these are the two types of science. I'd like just to summarize. Observational science, which is great, and that goes all our modern life. We depend on the operational science, and that goes well with the God creator giving us laws. Historical science or origin science, these events that happened in the past, we cannot create them again. And I give the example of Tutankhamun. What is the cause of his death? We don't know till now. There are different theories. So if we understand these two types of science, we'll be able really to progress and understand if atheism is scientific or not.
Thank you for the differentiation, because it always sounds like, in a way, atheism is scientifically proven. Yeah. This is just, maybe that's what we were taught, but yeah, it's more of like science goes well with atheism, and it's proven because it's been tested. We have carbon dating, we have, like things to tell us, and just to kind of go to the point that you said, the five senses. Will science allowed us to create machines and devices to expand our reach, yes, where we can see very far galaxies, or we can hear exactly things that we can't hear with our ears. Do you think even those devices, even things that were created, are not allowing us to know more or know all that we need to know?
No, it allows us to know more, definitely. And right, we appreciate that. And that's just wonderful. Mm-hmm. But we don't know everything. We don't know if the universe has a border and what happens at the end of the universe and if there is any other thing behind it. So it's all theories. Mm-hmm. So no, we are happy with the achievement of science, and I practice science and I use science in my job, and I yes, thank God for that. Yeah. So science is something great. But in order to understand God, who is a spirit, you have to have different way of understanding. I like to comment on your statement, David, when you said that atheism goes with science. It doesn't actually, because atheism depends on randomness, on chance, on time. Give me millions of years. So that really doesn't fit with science at all, mm-hmm, because all this way of thinking, all these elements to allow me to understand will not produce life. Mm-hmm. You mentioned something else, David, carbon dating. And
yeah, I was scared to mention it, because I know when I say that word, you can start on it. And we have a lot of episodes on it, very specifically, carbon right, dating. But yeah, go ahead. Sir.
Yeah. So I just want to mention something. Carbon dating goes with the Christian faith, not against the Christian faith. That will be a surprise to so many people.
I'm surprised, yes.
Yeah. Let me talk about diamond. Diamond is carbon. And they believe that diamond is really formed about 350 million years ago. So some Christians took pieces of of diamond and send it to the laboratory to see if there is traces of carbon 14. That's the isotope, the carbon. According to the life expand of the carbon 14, it shouldn't last for millions of years. It lasts for only thousands of years because of something called half-life. To their the surprise of the laboratory came up and saying, yes, there is traces of carbon 14 in diamond. And that proves it doesn't. It is not 350,000 or millions years ago. So obviously there are more details on this subject, but I just want to highlight that what we read in the newspaper and big titles, we need to read the text itself, and we'll find that it doesn't combat or come against the Christian faith.
So when it comes to operational science, the science of laboratories, the science of the laws of physics, what all the different laws that govern the universe, you're saying that this actually matches the Christian beliefs, the Bible, a lot more than atheism, or if it atheism at all, because operational science is specifically measuring the things that are happening right now, the things that we can test in labs, the gravity, for example, and how that impacts everything else, the solar system, all the things that we can measure and see. The difference becomes more obvious when we're talking about the historical science or the origin science, where we're trying to figure out the beginning or the origin, or what happened in other times, like, for Tutankhamun or any other times or periods that we're trying to come up with a theory of what happened from what we have, but we can't necessarily prove that's what happened 100%.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly a right summary of what I wanted to say.
Okay. And that clarifies that when it comes to gravity, the different laws of the sun and the earth and everything else, you said a huge statement that operational science does not contradict with the Bible. The Bible doesn't say anything about the earth being flat,
not at all,
or anything where it's like there's no gravity or there's other universe or anything like that.
No, let me just mention some of the terminology that really can confuse people. When they say the earth is fixed or built on its foundation. When you say foundation here, it is not pillars. Like when I say the English grammar is based on foundation, I don't mean pillars of cement. I mean there are laws controlling the English language. So when they say the earth is fixed on its foundation, that means there are laws that control the movements of the earth. In the oldest book of the Bible, book of Job, it speaks about he hangs the earth on nothing. And if you're sitting with Job at the time and say, if you hang this on nothing, it will fall. And it's illogical, but by the Spirit, he wrote this. We have to remember this is a Bible chapter written in, or Bible document, book written in poem. So there is a poem language, but the poem can communicate truth as well. So I'm not saying we discovered gravity by reading Job. No, I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
And I don't like this attitude of scientific evidence from the Bible. No. But what the Bible mentions in history or science is absolutely true because it is written by the Spirit of God.
Yeah, again, it clarifies that we're talking about operational science in terms of the things that we know. In science in general, there's a few laws. There's a lot of theories and things. We're not saying theories as we don't believe them, but there's a lot of theories that were been studied, but there's a few laws because scientists don't like just having laws, right? But they actually do have those laws. And you're saying the laws, the main science that we can test works fine with the Bible. It doesn't have contradictions. The problem comes with the historical origin science, where again we tend to believe that atheism or atheistic beliefs are in harmony more with that historical science. And I wanted to ask you, why is science like the measuring stick? Why do we always feel like science is a way of life? It's our savior. Why do you think we have to measure everything to science? And when we say we have to measure it to science, which science are we talking about here?
Yes. If we measure it to science, we are talking about the operational science. We are not talking about the historical science, because as we discovered, atheism really is anti-science. Atheism is not matching with the operational science at all. Atheism is trying to limit itself to the natural laws, and as a result, it does not understand create life, as we said in the previous episodes. So we're measuring everything as we're using science as the measuring stick, as you said, because we are enjoying the benefits of science in our life day by day. And we thank God for science and knowledge, because God gave us this knowledge to enjoy and to improve our life. And we can just understand the limitation of the physical laws. That's what I want to highlight, because the physical laws are limited in a sense, because there is something that you cannot measure in the lab. Let me give you an example. Can you measure how many kilograms of love in my heart or hate in my heart in the lab?
That would be useful.
That would be useful, exactly. But it's impossible to do it in the lab. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean because I can't prove it in the lab, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. It does exist because we experience love and we experience hate, right, but we can't measure it in the lab. I always like to think of the scale that we use in measuring gold. It's very sensitive, and nobody will doubt the accuracy of this scale. But if you take a big stone from the pyramids and put it on that scale, it will not be able to measure it. Mm. Not because this is not a good scale to use, but because the big stone cannot be measured by this instrument. It needs another one. So that's what I'm trying to explain in the operational science. We thank God for the operational science. It's important in our life, but at the same time, I cannot measure God in the laboratory because he's outside time.
So about this point,
yes,
it gets a little bit sensitive.
Exactly.
You know, that when we get stuck, we say you just don't understand. Yeah. When we get to a point where like, well, I can't prove God's existence or I can't prove that happened, then we just tell people it's because you don't understand or because you can't measure it. So the question is, now science, you're saying that science is, again, I don't want to say you're saying, what I got is,
exactly,
what I understood is that you're saying that science is unable to measure God's existence or most spiritual aspect or soul or personhood because it's limited.
Yes.
So how can we prove anything spiritual or
yes,
outside of the physical world scientifically if science is unable to do that?
That's great. It starts from God's end, really. God has to explain himself to us. And he did that through the creation. And we study the creation and the accuracy and the integrity and all of that. It's just amazing, irreducible complexity of lots of things. We will discuss that in detail, but just in a general statement, the creation cannot create itself, really cannot. So it has, and life comes from life, and God is life. So we understand God by him declaring himself to us. And the declaration happened with general declaration and special declaration. The general declaration is the creation, and we can talk about that for ages. And the other one is conscience, because everyone has this conscience there in their life to know that there is a judge and there is a God and there is right and wrong. There is a special revelation of God, and we Christians believe that the Bible is the written explanation about God. And then we have the Word who became flesh. So we have the written Word, and we have the Word who became flesh and dwelt among us, the Lord Jesus Christ. And through this, 4 elements, we can start to understand something about God, because he has to declare himself to us.
Okay, so because we're limited, and what you're saying is very humbling,
Yes.
it's because we're limited, we're unable to measure, comprehend, contain, really, God, the universe, a lot of things that we don't understand and know. God chose to reveal some of that, and we're not saying that it's the fullness of knowledge or anything. It's what we're still able to comprehend or understand.
Yes, absolutely.
So that revelation is your answer to the inability of science to prove
Yes,
the existence.
absolutely.
Okay.
Because he's outside the material things, and the lab measures the material things only. He cannot measure how many kilograms of love in my heart.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean love doesn't exist. So we experience God, we have a relationship with God, and as I said, he declares himself through the creation, through the conscious and special revelation, the written word, and the word who became flesh, the Lord Jesus Christ.
And those things are available to us to try to use and find out more.
Exactly. These things we can test. We can talk about the creation and see if it is by chance or by design. We can solve that issue.
Okay.
We can talk about conscious and understand something about it. We can talk about the Bible and see if it is a true book or not a true book, and the evidence is massive, but that's a big topic in itself. We can talk about the Lord Jesus Christ, because his birth divided the history before and after. So every day you write your date, you acknowledge the birth of Christ. So events of history and events of God's communicating to us and fulfillment of his prophecies written hundreds of years before Christ is great evidence of the message of the Christian faith.
And again, we're trying to answer the question of, we're using, maybe, like you said, not the right tools to measure something that's outside of those abilities, our abilities to measure.
Exactly. There is nothing wrong with the tools.
Yeah.
They are perfect and they are okay for
and
other
we're
reasons.
using them for very useful scientific research.
Exactly. But they are not able to use something which is spiritual, because you cannot have a weight on that. I'll use example of information again. If you have a CD-ROM with Encyclopedia Britannica and an empty CD-ROM and you measure them, they are the same weight.
Yeah.
But one is carrying Encyclopedia Britannica, which is massive amount of information.
Yeah.
So information, because it's not matter, you cannot weigh it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And there is another way to know about information.
Yeah.
This little example just explains that God is a spirit more than information, right? But you cannot weigh it. You cannot measure it in the lab. It doesn't mean that God doesn't exist at all. So actually, the operational science goes well with the creator God. The atheism is anti-science because it depends on haphazard reactions, forming life from nowhere, developing life from nowhere. Because in the development, if this chain of development, if there is a lethal chain came in the middle, it will destroy the rest. So there is massive, massive problem with evolution ideas.
Thank you so much for all the information and all the answers. I know it'll still take me some time to get there and understand, but I want to encourage all of you to continue to do that. Maybe re-listen and keep asking questions. I know we can be going really quickly. We're highlighting some of the things. We're not going into a lot of details, but we're trying to help you really think for yourself, ask the questions and try to find those answers. What we heard today is maybe atheism is not really going well with science, and maybe Christianity is closer to operational science. You can think about those questions. And I want to leave you with that from Richard Feynman, the famous physicist. He said, "I would rather have questions that can be answered than answers that can't be questioned." And everything we're saying, everything we're talking about, we want you to question. We want you to research, look up, read more. and we're really excited that you're watching. So thank you so much for your time and for watching, for listening. Thank you, Doctor, for your information.
Thanks,
we'll
David.
see you next time.
Thank you.